When you think animated movies, do you picture bright songs, happy endings, and safe popcorn fun? Think again. The 1980s didn't just give us Walkmans and neon. Animation exploded into a new, dangerous territory, with films so wild they made censors break a sweat and parents clutch their pearls. Ready to revisit the cartoons that sparked outrage, bans, and international drama? Which of these boundary-pushing classics would you have let your kids watch? Let's peel back the censorship and dive in. Heavy Metal, 1981. Let's kick off with a film that basically exists to make the censors nervous. Heavy metal is what happens when you let animators off the leash and hand them a stack of adult comic books, a guitar, and a pile of questionable substances. Released in 1981, this anthology film is a fever dream of sex, violence, rock and roll, and intergalactic insanity. A wild ride through the eye of every frustrated teenage metalhead. And if you thought parents' groups had a field day, you'd be right. The movie stitches together several stories from the cult Heavy Metal magazine, each one oozing with fantasy, horror, and a level of nudity that left American censors scrambling for their scissors. Within minutes, you're thrown into a universe of muscle-bound warriors, half-naked heroines, killer robots, and enough gore to make Freddy Krueger take notes. We're talking animated beheadings, psychedelic acid trips, and more topless women than a Daytona spring break, all served up with a hard rock soundtrack blasting Black Sabbath and Blue Oyster Cult. It wasn't just conservative watchdogs who lost their minds. TV execs and movie theater chains refused to touch it without slapping on a big, bold R rating, making Heavy Metal one of the most infamously adult cartoons of its day. The result? The film was cut, censored, and sometimes outright banned from TV, with some countries refusing to screen it at all. Even decades later, home video releases often landed in the adult section, far from the Disney shelf. But the controversy only cemented Heavy Metal as a cult legend. Bootleg VHS tapes circulated among rebellious teens, and every effort to suppress the movie just made it more appealing to anyone looking for animation that didn't play by the rules. In a way, the outrage was the best possible publicity. Who wouldn't want to see the cartoon that shocked a generation? Looking back, Heavy Metal wasn't just an animated movie. It was a declaration of war against the idea that cartoons had to be for kids. And the fallout? A tidal wave of parental warnings, media think pieces, and let's be honest, a ton of secret late-night screenings. If you wanted proof that animation could be just as provocative and problematic as live action, you couldn't ask for a louder, prouder example. Watership Down, 1978, UK/1980s, US TV. If Watership Down didn't traumatize you as a child, chances are you've never seen it, or you're still repressing the memories. Based on Richard Adams's best-selling novel, this cartoon about rabbits was anything but cute. Originally released in the UK in 1978, the film hit American audiences and unsuspecting TV viewers in the 1980s, sparking a wave of controversy that still gets name-checked in parenting forums to this day. Here's the setup. A group of rabbits flee their doomed warren, searching for a new home. Sounds like a gentle nature romp, right? Wrong. These bunnies don't sing, they fight, bleed, and die in ways that left kids wide-eyed and parents horrified. The animation is lush, almost hypnotic, but the violence is unflinching. Rabbits tear each other apart, choke in snares, get mauled by dogs, and endure suffocating fields of death. The filmmakers didn't shy away from the dark themes of Adams' novel, fear, fascism, and the brutality of nature. Instead, they leaned in, delivering one of the most uncompromising children's movies ever made. So what happened when Watership Down hit American TV in the 80s? You guessed it, an avalanche of complaints. Parent groups flooded broadcasters with angry calls. Children who'd been lured in by the animated style and cute promotional art ended up terrified, sparking a new debate about what family-friendly really means. Some local networks edited the most graphic scenes, others slapped on warning labels or moved the broadcast to late-night slots. In several countries, the film was rated for adults only, an almost unheard-of move for animation at the time. And yet, every attempt to sanitize Watership Down just made it more infamous. The phrase "that rabbit cartoon" became shorthand for accidental trauma, inspiring everything from think pieces to viral memes. Today, it's often listed among the most disturbing movies parents ever accidentally showed their kids. The punchline? Watership Down endures as a cult classic, still regularly cited in arguments over what animated films can or should depict. The film's defenders call it honest, brave, even essential. Its critics? Well, they're still trying to explain those nightmares to their grown-up kids. The Secret of Nimh, 1982. When Don Bluth broke away from Disney in the early 80s, he set out to prove that animated films didn't have to be watered-down fairy tales. The Secret of Nimh was his gauntlet thrown, an atmospheric, haunting tale about mice, science experiments, and survival that pushed boundaries like few other cartoons before it. And if you thought the censors would just let this one slide, you're in for a twist. At first glance, The Secret of Nimh looks like another animal adventure until you realize just how dark the story gets. Mrs. Brisby, a widowed field mouse, must save her family from certain doom, navigating a world of monstrous cats, heartless scientists, and the shadowy genetically altered rats of Nimh. The visuals are stunning, shimmering colors, gothic shadows, and a mood that slides from magical to downright chilling. But what really set off alarm bells were the film's themes: experimentation, death, and the kind of peril that made Disney's Bambi look like a picnic. Parents who brought their kids expecting another Fox and the Hound were in for a shock. The movie's violence is real. Characters bleed, die, and face mortal danger at every turn. Add in the psychological tension, panic attacks, existential dread, the whole 9 yards, and you've got a recipe for nervous phone calls to every local movie theater. School groups canceled field trips, and more than a few parents dragged their kids out of the theater halfway through. The controversy wasn't just in America. The UK and several European countries debated its rating, with censors arguing over whether Nimh was too frightening for children. Television airings almost always came with edits, disclaimers, or both. The debate spilled over into academic circles. Was this movie teaching kids to be brave, or just giving them nightmares? Of course, for animation fans, The Secret of Nimh became an instant classic, proof that the medium could be daring, dramatic, and even a little subversive. The backlash only made the movie's reputation stronger. Decades later, Nimh is still revered for its ambition and its willingness to treat young audiences with respect, even if it meant risking a few sleepless nights. If you want to see where the lines between kids' movie and psychological thriller first started to blur, this is the film that lit the fuse. Rock and Rule, 1983. You want weird? You want controversy? Welcome to Rock and Rule, the animated rock opera that threw the rule book out the window, then set fire to it, while Ozzy Osbourne blasted in the background. Released in 1983, this Canadian cult classic is a feverish blend of post-apocalyptic sci-fi, rock music, and, let's just say, adult situations that had censors reaching for their strongest coffee. The story? A world of mutated animals, electric guitars, and one megalomaniacal rock star trying to summon a demon with the power of music. Sounds like fun, right? Well, the fun gets interrupted by a cocktail of sex, drugs, and enough dystopian weirdness to make Blade Runner look like a school assembly. The visuals are bold and psychedelic. The soundtrack features legends like Lou Reed, Debbie Harry, and Iggy Pop, and the animation doesn't shy away from risque content. Suggestive dance numbers, drug references, violence, you name it, Rock and Rule probably animated it. Naturally, the movie ran headlong into trouble with the ratings boards. In the United States, MGM got cold feet and hacked the film to pieces, cutting out scenes they feared would shock parents or offend moral watchdogs. Voices were redubbed, music was trimmed, and the plot, already off the wall, became almost incoherent in the U.S. cut. Elsewhere, Rock and Rule was slapped with R or 18-plus ratings, and TV airings were almost unheard of. But as any cult movie fan will tell you, censorship often breeds legend. Word spread, here was a lost animated gem that dared to go where mainstream cartoons wouldn't. Bootleg copies circulated, and midnight screenings became a rite of passage for animation geeks and rock fans alike. The more censors tried to stuff it in a closet, the more people wanted to peek inside. Looking back, Rock and Rule is a time capsule of early 80s experimentation, a film that practically dares you to be offended. Was it ahead of its time, or just a gloriously messy misfire? That depends on who you ask. But one thing's certain, in an era when animation was supposed to be safe, this movie made safety look boring. Transformers, the movie 1986. Let's be honest, nobody expected a toy commercial to leave a generation of kids emotionally scarred. But in 1986, Transformers, the movie, rolled out and delivered one of the biggest gut punches in cartoon history, turning Saturday morning nostalgia into a lightning rod for controversy. If you grew up in the 80s, you probably remember the excitement. All your favorite Autobots and Decepticons on the big screen, voiced by legends like Orson Welles and Leonard Nimoy with a power ballad soundtrack. But here's where things got wild. In a single, brutal swoop, the film killed off Optimus Prime, along with a host of beloved characters, all to make room for new toys. Kids watched their robotic heroes blasted, stabbed, and vaporized, often in close-up with zero sugarcoating. Cue the fallout. Parents flooded Hasbro and movie theaters with complaints. The Transformers fanbase, which had been lured in by the bright colors and playful action of the TV show, was blindsided by the movie's violence and relentless death toll. Some children reportedly left theaters in tears, while toy sales for the new characters designed to replace the old ones didn't meet expectations, because, surprise, traumatized kids aren't great consumers. Censors took notice. For television broadcast, entire scenes were cut or softened. In some countries, the movie was edited for intense sequences. And then there was the now infamous moment when Spike Witwicky drops an actual swear word, a first for many young viewers and a detail that got scrubbed from later TV airings. Suddenly, Transformers, the movie, was ground zero in the debate over what was acceptable in children's entertainment. Ironically, the outrage only made the film more iconic. It's now regarded as a rite of passage, a movie that grew up with its audience and dared to get dark. The shockwaves from Optimus Prime's death led to massive changes. Other animated series shied away from killing off main characters, and studios started taking fan backlash a lot more seriously. Looking back, Transformers the movie wasn't just a toy commercial, it was a cultural earthquake. It forced both Hollywood and the toy industry to confront the power of animated storytelling and the wrath of disappointed kids everywhere. Animal Farm, 1954, U.S. TV resurgence in the 1980s. If there's one animated film that proves cartoons can get political, dangerously political, it's the adaptation of George Orwell's Animal Farm. While the film was originally released in 1954, its legacy of controversy hit new heights when it returned to American TV screens during the Cold War's peak in the 1980s. Imagine unsuspecting kids tuning in for a story about talking animals, only to be served a hard-boiled lesson in revolution, tyranny, and propaganda. Not exactly Saturday morning fun, right? This wasn't just any adaptation. Animal Farm was partly funded by the CIA as a tool of anti-communist messaging. The film ditched Orwell's famously bleak ending, where the pigs simply become indistinguishable from the humans they overthrew, instead showing the animals rise up and reclaim their farm, a move meant to inject hope that communism could be defeated. As if that wasn't controversial enough, the film turned Snowball, a stand-in for Leon Trotsky, into a fanatic villain, stoking the fires of political bias. when American broadcasters decided to dust off Animal Farm and syndicate it during the Reagan era, it wasn't long before fireworks erupted. Some viewers hailed the film as brave and educational. Others called it straight-up propaganda, accusing TV networks of brainwashing children. Teachers debated using it in classrooms, while some schools outright banned it, worried the message was too dark or too skewed for young minds. Meanwhile, parents flooded PBS and local stations with complaints, demanding warnings or age restrictions. Internationally, the film faced its own set of censors, especially in countries with communist sympathies or where anti-Soviet content was forbidden. Edits ranged from snipping scenes of violence to outright banning the movie. The conversation was rarely about the animation itself. Instead, Animal Farm became a lightning rod for debates about freedom, ideology, and the role of art in politics. Looking back, Animal Farm may not have featured the wild visuals or edgy humor of other films on this list, but its ability to provoke controversy was second to none. In the 1980s, it transformed from a relic of Cold War cinema into a fresh battleground for the culture wars, proving once and for all that animation can be just as dangerous and just as powerful as any live-action epic. Pink Floyd, The Wall, 1982. Few films have ever dared to drag viewers through the darkest corners of the human mind quite like Pink Floyd, The Wall. Sure, the film is known for its trippy visuals and rock opera bombast, but it's the animated sequences, surreal, disturbing, and at times outright shocking, that had censors on red alert in the 1980s. Who knew that pairing cartoons with rock and roll could launch so many headaches for the ratings boards? Directed by Alan Parker, The Wall brings to life Roger Waters' tortured vision of isolation, oppression, and madness. The live-action story is powerful enough, but it's Gerald Scarfe's animation that tips the whole experience into nightmare territory. Giant marching hammers goose-step across apocalyptic cityscapes. Flowers morph into sexual predators. Teachers become monstrous, devouring caricatures. Every frame is loaded with brutal metaphors for war, fascism, sexual repression, and mental collapse. Unsurprisingly, controversy followed wherever the film played. In the US and UK, censors went to work. Explicit scenes were trimmed, graphic violence muted, and sexual imagery blurred or axed entirely for television. In some countries, The Wall was slapped with adult-only ratings or banned outright for fear its imagery would corrupt youth or spark political unrest. The animated March of the Hammers became so notorious that it was cited in debates about censorship and the dangers of subliminal messaging in media. Parents who thought they were in for a standard concert movie were horrified when their teenagers came home rattled, or worse, inspired to deface a wall or two themselves. The animation's rawness was both its weapon and its curse, creating unforgettable visuals that are still dissected in film schools and art classes today. But here's the kicker. Every edit, every ban, every hand-wringing newspaper column just made The Wall more magnetic. Bootleg copies thrived, midnight showings sold out, and its reputation as the most subversive cartoon of the decade only grew. By the end of the 80s, The Wall had proven once again that animation can disturb, challenge, and even change the way audiences see the world. If you're looking for the movie that put fear into the hearts of censors and a fire in the bellies of rebellious youth, this is the wall you have to climb. Fire and Ice, 1983. If you blended a pulp fantasy novel with a heavy metal album cover and then set it all in motion, you'd get Fire and Ice. Directed by Ralph Bakshi and designed by legendary fantasy artist Frank Frazetta, this 1983 cult classic is what happens when animated movies stop pretending to be for kids. Swords, sorcery, and scantily clad warriors? Check. Enough violence and innuendo to give the MPAA a migraine? Double check. Fire and Ice plunges viewers into a prehistoric world of epic battles and brutal survival where muscle-bound heroes and curvaceous heroines fight for the fate of humanity. Forget Disney princesses. Here, it's all loincloths, magic, and the occasional decapitation. The film's rotoscoped animation, where artists trace over live-action footage, gives it a gritty, realistic edge, while Frazetta's influence oozes from every shot, making the action look almost too real for comfort. Naturally, censors and moral watchdogs pounced. The movie's sensual artwork and risque costuming, let's just say the female characters were not designed with modesty in mind, drew accusations of objectification. Meanwhile, its graphic violence, arrows to the throat, creatures dismembered, and a body count that would make Conan blush, pushed Fire and Ice straight into adult territory. The MPAA slapped it with an R rating, and TV broadcasters wanted nothing to do with it. In some countries, the film was trimmed or kept out of cinemas entirely, seen as too intense or too provocative for general audiences. Critics were divided. Some called it an animated exploitation flick, while others praised its bold artistry and willingness to embrace the pulpy, no-holds-barred spirit of classic fantasy. Fans, on the other hand, adored it. Midnight screenings and video rentals kept Fire and Ice alive, even as mainstream animation shied away from its edge. By the end of the 80s, Fire and Ice had carved out a reputation as one of the decade's most unapologetically adult animated films, a reminder that not every cartoon is a fairy tale, and sometimes controversy is the hottest fuel for cult legend. Feladay, 1989, U.S. release in the early 90s. If you thought animated animals were just for kids, Feladay would like a word. Released in Germany in 1989, this neo-noir murder mystery about cats, yes, cats, might just be the darkest animated film you've never seen. It wasn't until the early 90s that Feladay slunk into the U.S. on home video, but its European reputation for controversy was immediate and well-earned. Picture this. Francis, a new cat in a grim urban neighborhood, finds himself investigating a string of gruesome feline murders. As the bodies pile up, the story dives deep into themes of genetic experimentation, cult-like fanaticism, and some genuinely disturbing violence. Forget Tom and Jerry, this is more Silence of the Lambs, by way of Alley Cats, complete with scenes of mutilation, torture, and nightmare-inducing imagery. Oh, and there are sexual situations too, because why not push every button? European censors freaked out. In Germany and other countries, Feladay received adult-only ratings, and some theaters refused to screen it at all. Parents and critics alike called it irresponsible, while animal rights groups weighed in on the disturbing depiction of cruelty, even though the violence was entirely animated. When it finally arrived in the U.S., the controversy followed. The film was edited for content, and video stores routinely shelved it with horror movies rather than in the family section. What really made Feladay infamous was the gap between expectation and reality. Its stylish animation and animal protagonists looked deceptively family-friendly until you hit a ritual sacrifice scene or a graphic autopsy. The shock factor became the film's calling card, sparking debates about the limits of adult animation and what audiences could or should handle. Despite the backlash, Feladay developed a passionate cult following, especially among animation fans craving stories that dared to be different. Today, it's a cautionary tale for parents and a badge of honor for fans. The cartoon that proved you can make even Garfield look like a lightweight. The Plague Dogs, 1982. Brace yourself, few animated films hit as hard or stirred as much hand-wringing as The Plague Dogs. Released in 1982 by the same team that brought you Watership Down, this adaptation of Richard Adams's other notorious novel proved lightning could strike twice. If you thought traumatized rabbits were bad, wait until you meet these dogs. The Plague Dogs tells the bleak, harrowing story of two canine escapees from a government research lab who must navigate a world of suspicion, cruelty, and survival while being hunted by humans who believe they carry a deadly disease. The film pulls no punches. Animal experimentation is depicted in grim detail, including drowning, vivisection, and the psychological torment of its furry protagonists. The bleakness isn't just for show, it's the entire point, shining a harsh spotlight on real-world ethical debates. Censors and animal rights activists went berserk. The original cut was so dark that it was heavily edited for release in both the UK and the US, with entire scenes of suffering and death removed to make it more palatable. Even so, the movie was banned or given adult ratings in several countries, while TV networks wouldn't go near it. Critics debated whether the film was too much, even for adults, while some educators praised its honesty about animal cruelty. For children, the film's realistic animation style and animal leads were a recipe for accidental trauma. Many viewers and their parents assumed they were in for a sad but gentle tale. Instead, they got one of the most relentless animated movies ever made, a gut punch that refused to let up. As with Watership Down, the attempts to sanitize the plague dogs only made it more infamous. Decades later, it remains a touchstone for controversy, a film that showed just how far animation could go in exploring adult themes and just how quickly it could spark outrage. If you've ever doubted that a cartoon can break your heart and rattle your conscience, this is the one to watch. So, after a tour through nightmare rabbits, head-banging robots, and traumatized cats, are you ever going to look at cartoons the same way again? The 1980s didn't just redraw animation, they set it on fire and dared us to look away. Which of these films would you defend, and which still haunt your memories? Drop your thoughts, scars, or favorite controversial moments in the comments below. And remember, sometimes the wildest stories aren't hiding behind closed doors, but behind animated eyes.